Okay. Good evening. We are especially honored to have with us tonight a true pioneer in the world of amateur radio and emergency communications, Steve Waterman, K4CJX. Many of you know him as one of the original architects and co-founders of Winlink, the global messaging system that connects amateur radio operators via radio and internet pathways. But what you may not know is that Steve has been a central figure in shaping how Winlink has become a vital tool, not just for hobbyists, but for agencies and organizations around the world during natural disasters, maritime operations, and emergency deployments. His decades of service to the amateur radio community have included defining digital messaging standards, advocating for interoperability, and making sure that when all else fails, amateur radio still gets through. Whether it's getting email to a sailboat in the middle of the Pacific or passing traffic for FEMA and the Red Cross in a crisis zone, the system Steve helped build is the quiet hero behind the scenes. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to a man whose work has touched countless lives. Thanks, Steve, for joining us tonight. And now it is over to you.
I'll never meet your expectations. Thank you very much. I appreciate that introduction. Let me get the share screen up. Can you see that?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. All right, I can't see this very well, but I'll try it. Just wanted to give a little quickie about me, um, specifics. I let me. There we go. Okay. I was a licensed amateur radio operator as a novice in 1955, and that's not a mistake. Formerly director development of a university here in Nashville, Tennessee, where I reside, called Vanderbilt, for about 9 years. And I retired from a network design and consulting company where I spent about 21 years. Currently, I volunteer for the Williamson County, Tennessee Emergency Management Agency reserves, which are essentially employees without pay, which essentially gives us liability insurance, workers' comp, and an occasional meal. I work for the Tennessee Emergency Management Agency as a volunteer. I'm a COMU or communicator for them, and I am an emergency services coordinator for Winlink for that organization. I'm a FEMA Region 4, a Regional Emergency Communication Coordinating Working Group, Oxcom Subcommittee Chair. I've been there about 11 years. I'm co-founder of the Winlink radio email system and past president of a 501c3 called Amateur Radio Safety Foundation, which funds and runs the operation. I'm still a member of its board. I'm on the Winlink development team and the current Winlink administrator. So that's me. I'm going to give quickie about Winlink history. Winlink was a pre-Windows application called AppLink. I don't know if you remember on HF, there used to be a commercial protocol called CyTOR, and the hams took it and reversed some items in it. They call it AmTOR. And so the AmTOR packet link or AppLink was a precursor to WinLink. It was first used in the early 1980s. It was developed by Vic Poor, W5SMM, who was a co-author of the single chip microprocessor. It was a DOS-based system, and it connected amateur radio packet networks in large cities and regions over HF radio for long distance text messaging, so that one New York could send a packet to somebody in Los Angeles or Europe or anywhere in the world, and it would get there. It was used significantly, and I hope people write this down because it's a fantastic CBS documentary. It was used significantly during the 1990 Gulf War. It was called, the documentary was called Last Voice from Kuwait. If you Google it, if you Google it, there are many opportunities to see it. It's in two parts. Uh, I'm still impressed by it, um, the way that they put this together. Uh, it was used by the Navy briefly, and it helped create FCC Part 97.221, which some of you may recognize as a subband for automatic control of digital stations, meaning that you don't really have to be at the station to operate it. Um, from there, it went to Winlink Classic, which was launched in Dayton in 1993 on Windows 3.1. Winlink didn't have much problem, but Windows 3.1 was not easy to use. Uh, then we went to what's called Winlink Netlink, which went from linking packet networks to linking to email during the late 1990s. And that was used by amateur radio maritime community to maintain contact with their family and friends. That was used quite a bit for medical and other emergencies as well. Then we come to the Winlink Global Radio Email System, which continues to provide global communication mainly for emergency services by amateur radio and government worldwide. So we'll take a quick look at this. I wanted to let you know that uh, I'd say about 60% of Winlink is used on the amateur radio band worldwide. There are countries like the United States who also use it on their own government frequencies. And that's a story in itself. Just so we know what we're talking about here, here are the actual connections for a 24-hour period. Um, the colors indicate different services. Doesn't matter. It's all WinLink. If you look at Northern Europe and Europe, you'll see quite a bit of activity, of course, in the United States, New Zealand, Australia, and at certain times of the year, you'll see dots all over the high seas. Why WinLink? Well, sometimes we can't always rely on normal communication infrastructure. I can go back and talk about a major ice storm. It's pretty obvious here that cell service, microwave, state microwave, and other broadcast services, power lines, everything else are down for the count on the left. On the right was Hurricane Maria, where WinLink was um, because of the satellite interference caused by different agencies within our own government at similar facilities, there was a real gap in communication. And WinLink, both amateur radio and the DHS Shared Resources Program, provided WinLink services for that. So when you have landlines, cell phones, satellite communications, land mobile radio public safety, the internet, the grid, all these depend on communication infrastructure, which is really vulnerable. And it depends on cable, power, water, fuel, and mostly when we get down to it, people. So outages don't have to be a mass casualty event. It doesn't have to be an earthquake or a hurricane. I can remind people who may remember about a bombing here in Nashville, Tennessee, that only affected a single building and the street in front of it. And if you look at the map on the right, you can see that throughout the Southeast, it just took cell service, it took metropolitan public safety. It took internet down completely. Another more dramatic instance in the 2021, I believe, 2021, a farmer on the border of South North Carolina ran over a fiber cable and tore out Region 5 FEMA, which is Wisconsin, Michigan, Minnesota, um, Illinois, Ohio, Indiana. It just took all of that out. It also took, as you can see, a lot of communication out on the West Coast. So we can have obscure uh, instances that can cause a tremendous amount of damage. And for it took quite a while for them to determine where all of this originated. So, why Winlink again? We're looking at continuity or continuing of operation. And the lessons learned during any kind of a disaster are that infrastructure related outages usually endure for a very long period of time. They require usually additional equipment and people resources. There's all types of formal methods of obtaining those, but they're not always easy to come by. Sustaining essential functions is dependent on the availability of resilient communication systems. When your normal communication infrastructure is belly up, uh, that's not the time to plan for resilient communication. So to have that communication as a primary and at alternate locations has to be pre-planned and has to be kept up to date and maintained. Amateur radio volunteers do now provide an important information about the extent of outages, damages in radio when they're properly vetted and trained by their sponsoring agencies. Many agencies use the WinLink system to reach the internet SMTP mail during communication outages, and secondly, to obtain situational awareness ground truth. And here's why. In an emergency, they need to have extremely resilient communication. There are physical problems where you're asked to move to an incident command and help the agencies that are there, and there's no street signs. There's no streets. Sometimes it's all underwater. Sometimes it's under snow. Sometimes it's just total devastation. So for the cost of WinLink, it became very popular um, during these last 10 or 15 years because of the low cost, because of the ability of volunteers to maintain it, install it, maintain it, operate it, and provide a pathway or a transport layer for complex messaging. And when not on the ham bands, encrypted. So WinLink provides email from any point on Earth, including in the middle of the ocean or your own county. Messages sent HF, VHF, UHF radio, or all three, and they can be sent on Telnet. Now, why use Telnet? Well, if you're asked to participate in an emergency and you have internet, use it. You don't want to get on the radio and eat up the frequencies used by those people who have no other choice but to use the radio. So Telnet is an important function. WinLink software and use of the system are free of charge. Hardware costs anywhere from $1,500 to $4,000, and that's a lot less than one P25 handheld radio that a policeman would have on his belt. A lot less. So WinLink provides 100% accurate transmission because of the protocols that it uses. It's either all or nothing, similar to your email, as opposed to a broadcast mode like MT63, Olivia, PSK31, FT8, CW. Okay, this is point to point, not point to multipoint. The AES 256 encryption on transmission is provided by all vendors that provide a protocol, including Vera for $75 if you're not on the amateur radio service. The ITU does not allow, does not ask countries to permit encryption. So if you look at Part 97.113, we're not allowed to obscure the meaning of data on amateur radio spectrum, Part 97. Winlink is an interoperable store and forward system similar to email, providing time and frequency independence on multiple services. What I mean by that is if I'm on amateur radio, I can send an email to a call sign on a government service, an amateur radio service, a public safety, Part 90 uh, public safety service, or any other related service, or all of the above in one single email and send it out. And when a ham picks it up, the ham abides by his rules. When the public safety picks it up, they abide by their rules, etc. So the interoperability with Winlink, because all messages eventually get to be the RFC for SMTP mail format. Because of that, we can cross services, and that's extremely valuable, especially in an emergency. So Winlink continues to prove itself, and in frankly, when Starlink came into being, I thought we were done for. I could retire from this, but uh, Starlink has spawned an even greater growth of Winlink because it's let agencies know, especially the smaller county agencies, where the crossing guard is the same as the mayor of the county or the city in the county. It's let them know that they do need resiliency, and this is a very low cost. A second reason for it, by the way, this is Winlink connectivity immediately following Hurricane Helene for 24 hours. And this is Winlink connectivity, actual connectivity uh, for the hurricane that followed immediately thereafter, Hurricane Milton in Florida. So every EMA, emergency management agency, has a primary, alternate, contingency, emergency plan. They may not call it a PACE plan, but they have a PACE plan. And they should be certain that this PACE plan has contingency and emergency options. So when public safety and FirstNet, satellite services, internet are not available, they have options. Sight on wheels for public safety, cell on wheels for temporary cell service, portable land mobile radio public safety, and satellite services such as Starlink and many others. Uh, and when those are not available or can't get to the site, um, or they're not there yet, the contingency option, the fallback method, the alternate solution is usually um, Winlink. And Winlink is uh, one that's rarely used, fortunately, often forgotten, and sometimes not there when it's needed. Our government, and any other government, has a tendency to realize its mistakes after the fact for a short period of time. If you think about your own state, they budget for an emergency, and then everybody forgets about it, and the budget goes away, and the emergency management personnel pay attention to what they've been paid to do, which is handle the conventional systems, and forget about what keeps them reminded are volunteers knocking on their doors. So this is just a look at some temporary, what I call drop kits or go kits used by various agencies currently using WinLink. The one on the left is, I think that's Tennessee National Guard. You're close to the Virginia National Guard. They have quite a setup on the shared resources, a cybersecurity infrastructure security agency shared resources system um, in the state of Virginia. TSA has over 100 locations on that network um, in 100 different airports, 106 different airports. The county that I work with, Williamson County, that's their Go Kit. The Red Cross headquarters and in the St. Croix, Virgin Islands, has a system that's maintained by amateurs, but frankly, it's on the shared resources system. The state of Illinois just bought 19 kits to go into their emergency IEMA, the Illinois Emergency Management Agency's cadre of cache radio systems. And then the Shares Resource Program, this was given to them by Idaho National Labs. So interoperability, again, is a key element of this system. It's allowed the amateur radio operator to become involved with real-life emergencies through formal National Incident Management System, Incident Command System processes, like taking courses and becoming involved with the agency by taking courses with people in those agencies so that you can build trust and they know who you are. You can't just knock on the door after an emergency's occurred and expect them to agree to anything. I'm sure we all know that. So Winlink provides two major components to assist with information flow during emergency. First thing it did and has done since its inception is bridge over radio to the internet email system. Doesn't require communication infrastructure between the originator and the recipient, other than propagation. There is an additional last resort radio only mode that does not depend on the internet whatsoever. It's a big, like a giant mesh system. So on one of the government services, I can uh, send a message to the state emergency management agency or to your state emergency management agency in Maryland. And if I'm sending it to Robin Lou and the Oahu EMA, it will hop, skip, and jump based on heuristics, time of day, propagation, where the radio message servers are located, what frequencies they're on, etc., and reach the uh, Oahu on Diamond Head in short order without any internet whatsoever. Obviously, the load on that system was not as capable as the load of normal Winlink, which has a common message server system that uh, takes care of a myriad of items and does use the internet where it's available. So both methods provide a pathway for intranet agency messaging. Again, they don't care about us providing traffic handling for them. That's not why we're there. We're there to provide a pathway or a transport layer for their inter and intra agency messaging. Winlink is capable of taking it off of a desk of an office in an agency and running it through their local area network to a, uh, a device that will allow it to send a message over amateur radio or any other radio. So it's much dependent on amateur radio volunteer knowledge and participation. Agencies like to get people who know what they're doing as volunteers in the amateur radio community because it alleviates them from having to learn all of this if they're not amateur radio operators. And secondly, it alleviates their time so that they can do things that we can't do. They could spend their time doing, quote, more important things. So the second thing that WinLink does, and it's becoming the primary thing, I don't know how many people were involved in the annual Did You Feel It exercise for the Great Shakeout for the USGS and FEMA. But anytime there's an earthquake, there's a template on the end-user client program, WinLink Express, that will allow you to provide the USGS with and others with information about the problems you may or may not have experienced during that particular earthquake. And what they do with that, they provide that information to FEMA, who then can fund the recovery of that disaster, if there is one. Uh, so let's address that use of Winlink if we can. The military talks about fog of war. Well, there's usually also in civil disasters a fog of information. During major civil disasters, there's a process that the incident command system utilizes regardless. It starts at the county level. If they need help, they call the state. If the state needs help, they call the federal government. They evoke what's called the Stafford Act or the Emergency Management Alliance Compact, and then the federal government gets involved. But the counties never lose their jurisdiction nor their authority to maintain their own jurisdictions. So how do you plan an effective response and recovery if your communication infrastructure is wiped out? You don't know the extent of the outages. You can't notify anybody that you need this information. So how do you get this information uh, without any communication infrastructure? How do you know who to send uh, hospital information to, prescription inventory, food inventory, inoculation inventory, bedding, housing? There's no way to determine that unless you have a predetermined plan that can use volunteer resources in communities like amateur radio, sort of like Skywarn. So Winlink has features that can provide this type of information when other means aren't available. And this is where the volunteer resources become valuable. Now, in Maryland, they're not as valuable as they are in North Carolina, that gets hammered annually, or South Carolina, or Florida, or Texas, or some of these places on the Gulf that get continually bashed by natural uh, weather events. Um, and Maryland doesn't have half of the state uh, uh, wiped off the face of the earth due to a hurricane. They have tornadoes, they have floods, they do have disasters, but they're not what I call a mass casualty event. So, as I said, you could relate what WinLink does sort of to what the volunteers do when they call in an organized fashion under the Skywarn banner. So what's needed to submit and display reports? WinLink Express is a no-charge WinLink client or email program that connects to your radio or the internet or both, and it runs on Windows. There is a version that runs on an iPhone. There's a version that runs on Android. There's a version that runs on Linux, but it doesn't have the functionality of the one that we produce. It's good for just understanding WinLink, but it doesn't contain a catalog with over 800 weather products, etc., and over 100 templates. All the incident command forms for the United States, other countries, state forms, non-government organization has forms in here, etc. So WinLink Express has over 100 built-in HTML forms. That means that we can replicate what the form actually looks like. And there's a blank form on each end, and we only send the data of the form. So instead of sending a file that would take 10 times as long to send if we were sending the actual form with the logo and all that on it, we just send the information that's filled out, and it takes minutes. And that's used by federal, state, and local agencies. It's used by the American Red Cross. It's used by hospitals to get bed reports. It's used by many other service groups. The many forms send data with positions so they can be mapped. And that's extremely important. When you think about an EOC or Emergency Operations Center pit or operations uh, room where many different agencies come together and assist a representative, the emergency services coordinator for each agency, health and welfare, transportation, Corps of Engineers, National Guard, etc. All the telcos. Um, they're all in one room under one banner, and that is to deal with whatever incident is there. And they put up what's called WebEOC on the wall, which is a list of pending action items and spent action items. They also put up graphics like they have a big commercial uh, mapping program called ArcGIS. And ArcGIS goes on the wall so they can see where their problems are. And Winlink Express feeds that program. And Winlink Express has its own graphics and its own GIS, but they're not really fancy. So really no other software is needed, but they do take the information from our program and input it into their mapping. So situation reports and other enabling forms. These forms cover just about everything. They cover weather, they cover hospitals. If you need to, if you've got more patients than you do hospitals, uh, you can request surrounding hospitals to send a bed report so that you can determine really how many beds are are available and how you can send those people and whether they'll be accepted or not, what the condition of the hospital is that's receiving them, etc. So reports may be needed to and from no internet locations, and that's where Winlink comes in. Um, Starlink is great. Starlink is there. G2 Satcom is there. Um, Other satellite services are there, but they're not there everywhere because of cost and conditions. So Winlink does offer that option, and because it doesn't cost them much, and they can utilize volunteers, which look great in their community, uh, they use Winlink for those purposes. So we produce a file called a CSV file mainly, and that file grows as the incoming data grows. And as the incoming data grows, so does the CSV file, and so does the map that they put up on their wall. So when receiving an incident command center, Winlink Express displays that map and shows the, the status of the reports that come in. It also can generate uh, files, as I said, for these spreadsheets and for these GIS programs. This is what it looks like on Winlink Express. On every Winlink Express, you have the capability of providing. This was a report. This was from a FEMA Region 4, Region 6 annual exercise that tested NAWAS. Remember the old red telephone, the National Warning System that is now digitized. They also test FNARS, the FEMA National Emergency Radio System. They test G2 Satcom, which multiple states use to speak to each other, like similar to voice trunking. Um, and they test Winlink. And this is the Winlink portion of, I think, a 2022, I believe, FEMA Region 4, Region 6 exercise. And this is those pins in red. It was a cyber attack exercise, and the cyber attack was on Dallas, Texas, Charlotte, North Carolina, Miami, Florida, and Little Rock, Arkansas. And I just took an example here to show you can see in Little Rock and you can see in Fort Worth in Dallas where there was no internet, which is plainly visible. So I'm going to get a little fancier here. As I mentioned to you earlier, um, Winlink can provide this information, but uh, the GIS function at an emergency management agency in a county or a state or federal government is much fancier and does a much better job than we can do with our software. Same data, it's just not as pretty. So this is what it looks like. This is South Carolina Emergency Management Division displaying the same data using the commercial application called ArcGIS. And this is the same, I think, the same exercise. We had 970 participants. Recently, I did a Region 4, Region 5, Region 6, and Region 7 exercise, which was an earthquake exercise with the epicenter in Memphis, Tennessee. We had over 1,100 people. They only had 3 days' notice that the exercise was going to be um, that they were going to be asked to participate, and that was intentional. If you think about amateur radio and you have a set, you spend all year long, you know when it's going to be, you know how to plan for it, you take your time, you do everything right. But in real life, emergencies don't work that way, just like they're not budgeted that way. Here's another picture of the ArcGIS providing showing the states that were involved, to what extent they were involved, and to what extent their outages, the public works, safety, cellular, internet, landlines, etc., TV stations, whether they were in or out. This is more of the same thing, where South Carolina Emergency Management generated a detailed display of the spot reports, people with commercial power, people without it, I mean, people without public works, people without cell phone, and people without internet. And this is the timing for the reports. Obviously, it shows when the exercise took place, and it shows the number of people that participated. Most of these, if are not agencies, and if they are, they were agencies that reported because amateur radio operators were there to assist them. Let's see if Maryland's on here. Yeah, there's Maryland. Nope, nope. I don't see Maryland. I'm sorry. Okay, so example, there's a program called CISA Shared Resources Program, or shares, and it's done because I'll get to that in a minute, but there are very many restrictions on amateur radio. So for the NIMS trained vetted volunteer amateur radio volunteer, what can what can a government spectrum provide in addition to that provided on the amateur spectrum? Well, we think about it, with ham radio, we're not allowed to obscure data. Well, hospitals and agencies don't want body counts and prescription inventory and private information being transmitted to the public and the press. So, password protected documents and encryption is critical when not on the ham bands. Doesn't mean hams aren't doing it. It means they're not using the amateur radio spectrum. They want the services I was talking about. There are 103 HF frequencies and some VHF, and there's no channelization on amateur radio. You could have an emergency, and it could be during field day or one of the big contests. No mercy. Okay, so there's no channelization whatsoever. Agencies are allowed to operate the radios no license needed on this other system, on the government system. In the FCC, you've got to have a control operator present if you don't have a license. No pecuniary, you can't be paid and spend any time at all doing this for on amateur frequencies. Much expanded HF spectrum. There's no gaps. There's no gap between 40 meters and 80 meters and 60 meters and 30 meters and 20 meters. And these resources, there's a lot of propagation in between those spectrums, and it's utilized all the way through on the shared resources system and other commercial or other systems that Winlink uses that amateur radio operators are involved with, but it's not the amateur radio spectrum where you can't just get on and listen. So it does have a lot of direct interoperability with other communication resources. Uh, that means that on the exercise for FEMA, the hams got on the ham band and sent the message to a non-amateur call sign at winlink.org, which is simply another email address. So there was no cross radio. There was only radio on the ham bands, and then the people who had the government capabilities and licenses picked it up on government frequencies. So that's a key resource, that interoperability. So there's a place for us. This is the National Incident Management System organization chart. This is the logistics section of that chart. This is the communication part, which is not under operations, it's under logistics. And if you look down there, you'll see auxiliary, Auxcom. Okay, Auxcom then is not a program like it doesn't compete with the ARRL. It encompasses the ARRL. It doesn't compete with Mars. It encompasses Mars. It's a function. It's a task on an organization chart. It's not a program. So there's a lot of like races. There's a lot of misuse of that term. But the point here is they do want us, they do recognize us. And I think all of this has changed because now, whether you're a volunteer or whether you're a seasoned professional, you follow the same National Incident Management System process as everybody else. So everybody's playing on the same tune. And that made a big difference. So, Winlink radio UMOS system for emergency management. HF radio, tuner and antenna, about $1,600. Factor 4 modem, if you need it, $200. If you don't, Vera HF FM is just as effective, $75. It's software only. The ability to send email when commercial communications systems fail is priceless. That's about it. Unless there's questions, I really appreciate the opportunity to present to you, and I hope all of this made some sense.
Well, thanks, Steve. Great presentation. A lot of information, and so questions for Steve. Tom, you're up.
Thank you. Steve, one of your slides showed the rule about amateur radio operators not making money off of this, but some people get confused that it means that nothing about money can go over amateur radio. Isn't that an overstatement? As long as the amateur radio operator.
What I'm saying is you cannot be paid a paid employee of an organization and use amateur radio while you're on the job. They changed Part 97.113 so that government can spend about 70 hours, I believe, a month, and that's it. But if you are a telco and you use amateur radio and you're being paid, you cannot use it on amateur radio unless you have a stay or a waiver. It doesn't mean you're trying to make money on amateur radio. It means that when you're getting paid, you're not allowed to use that spectrum
Right.
because
So,
amateur radio is not an emergency service.
right, I follow that. But I'm on the radio,
Hmm.
just being an operator, and
Hmm.
somebody wants to file a press report. I'm not making any money off it. So, is it okay I file this press report via email?
That's up to you. Yes,
As
sure.
long as I'm not making money off it, I'm not
This
disobeying
is
any
not
law or
about,
rule.
yeah, this is not about you making uh, per, trading stock or what have you over amateur radio.
Right.
This is about you being a paid employee to deal with emergency services, and now you're on amateur radio using that spectrum. That's not legal after a certain number of hours. You can look at 97.113 something, CABC, I don't know which one it is, and it will give you that information specifically. Does that help?
Yes, very much. I appreciate it.
Okay, sure.
Okay, Ben, you're up.
Hey there. This is Ben, KD3BXL.
Hi, Ben.
Have you noticed any impact with Starlink? Specifically, have there been any major disasters where Starlink was involved, and did it get overloaded? Still
Uh,
requiring
yes,
Winlink?
yes, and yes. The
Okay.
uh, in Hurricane Helene, Starlink was brought in from Florida and other places to North Carolina and East Tennessee. Uh, but by the time it got there, uh, it couldn't. They couldn't get into it. They couldn't get in. But since then, many states have purchased Starlink and hold it in their cache radio system or their cache system, so that the state of Tennessee, I think, has 100 now. But that's great for an incident. That's great for a public safety building. That's great for a hospital, but it doesn't get into the neighborhoods, at least not yet. I believe that soon we're going to see cell services out of that you'll be able to use using Starlink. However, remember, you're inside of a building. Starlink's not, and neither is a cell phone if you're going to be using it. So there's a lot of, and recently, if you read the news, they've blanked out Starlink in certain countries um, by providing interference locally
Hmm.
um,
Right.
and by tinkering with GPS. And if they want to knock out a service, they're going to knock out a service. Just like when the Secret Service comes to your community, they will warn the local public safety that wherever they are, there isn't going to be any public safety because they just knock everything out. How they do that, you have to ask them. But just you and me, we're in our homes, and if we have Starlink, that's great. But if they need it, you're not going to have very much access to it if they need it. So, to answer your question, does it get overloaded? All internet gets overloaded at some point. Um, it just depends on, I mean, you ever called on a cell phone into a disaster area or
Right.
even normally, and you get a
Hmm.
fast busy saying all
Hmm.
circuits are busy?
Hmm.
Well, they have something called WPA and uh, Wireless Priority Service, WPS, I mean, and GETS, which is a landline version of that, that allow you to dial certain numbers, pre-numbers before you dial the number, that allow you to get through that anyway.
Hmm.
And that's really one of the purposes of FirstNet, right? So if I can't get through, um, well, the reasons I can't get through is they usually take that trunking that's incoming and put it over to outgoing so they could get more information out than worrying about is Aunt Millie uh, alive and well. And if Aunt Millie's alive and well, they want her to be able to call out. So, so I hope that answers your question.
Okay. Thanks very much.
Sure.
Okay, any more questions?
Are there any Winlink users here other than I recognize Tom Horn?
Yeah, this is David. Yes, certainly am. Um, During COVID, I used it a lot. So it was fun trying to connect to as many HF stations. So I joked that my favorite WinLink favorite station was me. You know, if I got the email from, let's say, Puerto Rico, then obviously I communicated through Puerto Rico.
Well, one of the problems with amateur radios, like for example, I'll give you 40 meters. We have 5 kilohertz where automatic control, where a radio message server can operate. We have 5 kilohertz. Each radio message server is 2.3 to 2.75 kilohertz wide. And we have 273 in the United States alone, all trying to scan that 5 kilohertz. So it could get built up in a hurry, and it doesn't do any good to get an STA or a waiver because people know where those things are. They're already programmed inside of WinLink Express, so it doesn't do any good to move them because people don't know they're there. So especially if they don't have internet, they can't find out that they're there. Most people don't bother to download over the radio the frequency list. Uh, so that's why the government provides other services that use WinLink and allow amateur radio operators through their authorities having jurisdiction and critical infrastructure non-government organizations to use WinLink. And there's a lot of hams now that are becoming involved with their agencies that do that type of thing. You have a fellow named Ross Merlin that is on our board that ran that service for a while. He developed the National Information, what do they call it, NIFOG Frequency Operations Guide, not National Interoperable Frequency Operations Guide. He's the one that authored that. And he ran the program I'm talking about for about 7 years. After that, he's retired and on our board. So you've got a lot of emergency managers that are hams. The emergency manager for North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, Tennessee, Kentucky, avid amateur radio operators. Maryland, I don't know. Virginia, I don't know. Um, but the statewide interoperability coordinators all meet under the SafeCom banner, and when they meet, they communicate with each other, and volunteer resources are discussed at great length. Back in the day before the National Incident Management System was a common process, amateur radio operators would come in and try to run the show. And so we did not develop the best reputation. Since that time, things have changed dramatically. And uh, a smart agency manager forms his own reserve and doesn't get involved with this group or that club or the ARL or ACS or any. He picks the best of each organization and forms his own reserve organization and that he can manage. And a lot of hams are resistant. A lot of ARRL leadership don't want to give up their badges. They go to Hamfest, they like to have that badge on. So there's a lot of give and take in that world.
Hmm.
Does that make sense? Thank you.
Great. Can I ask you one question?
You can ask as
What?
many as you wish.
How did you come up with the idea? What got you started on WinLink?
Well, Vic Poor, who I said was the co-author of the single chip microprocessor, once that happened, he retired. When Intel got hold of it, he retired, and uh, he had lived in the Seattle area, and he had a boat, and he took that boat out in the sea, and he wanted to communicate with his ham buddies digitally. This is pre-email, and so he used it on HF to get to another HF station that also was connected to VHF packet. And so he could talk to all of his buddies from his vessel. Then he decided he wanted to go around the world on the sailboat, and he went around the world on a sailboat a couple of times with his wife, and that application grew. If you please go look up The Last Voice from Kuwait. It's with Charles Carrot. It's whatever his name was, the CBS commentator. It's a fabulous commentary where they provided health and welfare and did other things very quietly in between those health and welfare messages that you may want to review. Uh, and it grew. The Navy then used it for a while. Um, and then when Windows came to pass, uh, the maritime community grabbed hold of it and they used it constantly, which is about the only way they could use it to uh, get to their family and friends to let them know they were safe. I mean, do you have children?
Mhm.
Well, if they were on a sailboat, wouldn't you want to hear from them every once in a while? Or they're crossing the ocean in a 33-foot boat going to Australia or somewhere. So, yeah, so it became very popular in that for 10, 15 years in that arena. It's still used, but it's not as popular because there's other means. And then when things started happening for whatever reason you think they happened, more and more emergencies took place with state, local, and federal agencies. Um, and the National Incident Management System started training and providing the same certificates that the professionals receive. These people integrated and met with these people, had lunch with them, had a beer with them, and before you know it, they're volunteering now for emergency services all over the country, including Maryland, Kent County, wherever that is. That comes to mind. There's 2 or 3 counties that are very active in that process in Maryland. Uh, I don't know whether they're ham clubs or what they are, but they're active. In Virginia, um, the more um, in some states and in some counties, emergency management is only a concept, not an experience. And as you know, you can just because you can read the menu doesn't mean you know what the meal tastes like. So if you haven't been in the mud and the blood, there's a big difference in the way you look at things as opposed to just knowing about it.
Mm.
So and budget, the budget reflects that too. I mean, the budget and the percentage budget for emergency services in Maryland, I doubt if it's the same proportion as the emergency budget per size in North Carolina. It's just the way it is because every time you turn around, something's happening there because of the weather. There's a reason the weather's that way, but it is. So, to answer your question, uh, I hope they did it.
Yes, thank you.
Mhm.
Any more questions before we close for the night? Okay. Steve,
Well, I
thank you
certainly
again.
thank you very much for giving me this opportunity um, and putting the thing together. I hope it was meaningful to you.
Unbelievably, it's invaluable, and we will make sure that we load it up on YouTube so we can share your great insights, your great information and guidance with other people in the amateur radio community and other people that watch YouTube. So it's been a great presentation, a great evening with you, Steve. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. If you are interested in hearing the FCC or FEMA or any of the active states that utilize amateur radio volunteers extensively, you might look at Rat Pack on YouTube.
Rat Pack?
Rat Pack, RATPAC on YouTube,
Okay.
and you'll see um, many people from many parts of the government providing information,
Okay.
much more than I can. Thank you. I appreciate this.
One of the
Thank you. All
one of-
right. Wonderful presentation. Thank you.
one
All
of
right.
the
So
classes